noises, but I am going to take imperfect action. And before we start, I just wanted to say Merry Christmas, because some people are celebrating Christmas 2 weeks later, people that celebrate Orthodox Christmas. And that's why I have my wheatgrass here. And the wheatgrass is a symbol of nature and renewal. So I thought that was a cool thing to have on my desk. So that's good feng shui. It's right here for me. So I'm going to launch right into today's topic, which is about freedom and structure, boundaries, and containers. And as usual, I'm not going to talk about which one is better and which one is worse. I'm going to talk about that little slider where you can choose at any given time where you want to be on that continuum, because it's going to depend. It's going to depend on the day. It's going to depend on your preferences. It's going to depend upon the situation that you're talking about. As usual, I'm going to be talking about life and business, because I know a lot of you are entrepreneurs, and I am too. So let's go ahead and explore this. First, let's talk about structure, rules, boundaries, and containers. Well, first, let me tell you a story, or kind of recall a story that you guys probably are already familiar with if you've seen the movie Groundhog Day. So let's just say you wake up every single day having to start from scratch all over again without any knowledge of your past experience, anything about what happened before this moment, about what works and what doesn't work, no plans, no strategy, or even a nice hotel to base your operations from. Now, granted, Bill Murray had these things in the movie. He had some kind of reference point, and he had recollection of what was working and what wasn't working. And gradually, as he started progressing in the movie, he freed himself via containers and structure and boundaries. So even one single constant or anchor can provide a structure or a starting point. So for him, it was the song "I Got You, Babe" that played on the radio that immediately had him anchor himself and recall where he was at again, and thinking about things that he could do without having unlimited possibilities for the day. He actually had a strategy. So that was his way out of his prison. So I thought that I would use that as an example of how structure or strategy can help you be more free. One more thing about that movie. He was also lucky because, like in some science fiction movies, he might have woke up in a parallel reality, maybe a desert with no water, or a place where there's monsters that are ready to eat him. I've actually seen movies like that, and that would not be good, right? Starting from scratch all over again, rolling the dice all over again. So let's not talk about sci-fi for a moment and reframe this in everyday life. So what if you woke up every morning having to make fresh decisions? And these are things that we could take for granted. So let's say you wake up in the morning and you're thinking to yourself, or if you had to think to yourself, where should I even start? Should I find water? Should I post on social media? Should I make toast? What should I do first? Now, if this sounds ridiculous, it's because you have some foundations in place already. This is actually structure and automation that you have, things that are already done for you. So you don't have to think about them. You don't have to think about the basics. That shit's already done so that you can focus on what has meaning and purpose for you. So yeah, you don't have to think about things that have already been invented, established, or known. Right? So this isn't just about making toast. It's about everything that you do in your life and business. So established containers mean less brain power. You don't have to think constantly about what you're going to do next, because you can channel it into something else, something more productive. So without structure, you're all over the place. You're stressed out. You're overwhelmed. You don't even know what to do first because you have way too many choices. You're guessing all the time. You're throwing pasta at the wall. You're using trial and error, but not the productive kind that helps you learn from your mistakes. These are just like random trial and error stuff that can totally be avoided if you had some kind of structure or knowledge in place. You're not going to be able to grow and evolve and get to the next level because you're doing random shit all the time. And you're probably not going to be able to achieve any kind of greatness. So now let's talk about when too much structure obviously is not going to be a good thing. Obviously, you're not going to have much freedom if you have a ton of structure. So for sliding that little slider way down toward the structure end of the continuum, that's not going to be much fun either. It's going to be constricting or limiting. You're going to miss opportunities. You're going to have canned and boring experiences. Little story here talking about this, a story of two families. When this was back in the 90s, and I would travel with both my husband's family and my family, and it was like night and day. When we traveled with his family, everything was done via itinerary, and we had to stick to that itinerary. So if you were enjoying yourself in a museum somewhere, I remember my father-in-law and I enjoying a mining museum, and we are both nerds and we wanted to hang out, but nope, we couldn't because we had to have lunch, and then we had this other thing to do, and then this other thing to do. There was so much structure that it wasn't even fun anymore. Same thing with dinners with them. It just wasn't fun. But with my parents, it was the total opposite. We would, I think in a good way, it wasn't like too much non-structure, but I distinctly remember traveling up Highway 1, and we would find a cool place. And if we liked it, we would stay there for a couple of days. We would linger over drinks or dinner or something like that. So it was really nice. It was so much more of a pleasant experience. Now, of course, when it comes to traveling, because right now I'm in Europe, and that slider again, I don't like canned experiences. You will not see me on a cruise. If you like cruises, more power to you. I'm not against it, but it's not my cup of tea. It's not my thing, because I prefer to actually be immersed in a place, like live here. I've lived in Dalmatia. I've lived in Italy. I've lived in Istria. I've lived in Zagreb and all over Bosnia. I've lived in Belgrade. So I feel like I've had really cool, genuine experiences, like real memories for me. And I know this is about preference. I know this is about preference, but at the same time, that freedom, I still have to have structure because I have to have a valid passport. I have to know about borders and how to get on an airplane, basic travel experience, contacts, basic language skills. So these things are actually going to help me. You can't just plop me down in the middle of a foreign country without a passport, and that would be really scary. That wouldn't be fun anymore, right? So same thing if you're traveling in the United States. Wow, I really miss road trips in the Western United States. I used to drive from Denver to Tucson, and oh, that was so much fun. But when you're doing that, you have to have a reliable vehicle, gas money, maps, or a GPS, and a general feel for the accommodation in the area. You have to know where Border Patrol is, because I remember driving one time and way away, far away from the Mexican border, I discovered that there was Border Patrol. So stuff like that, you have to know what's going on, right? So when structure is not a good thing, that's when you have groupthink and inside the box thinking and lack of innovation and leadership. And yeah, it's hard to succeed if you have too much structure. Okay, so let's talk about freedom, limitlessness, and possibilities, the second concept. And for a lot of people, I mean, I probably don't have to explain why this is a good thing, right? So we're imagining traveling and road trips and finding all these cool places and discovery and all that good stuff. So it's about endless possibilities. It's about seeing the world for the first time, which is wonderful. You need to do that as a child. You need to do that as a teenager. You need to do that as a young adult. And I think we still need to do this in middle age. And when we're doing things like traveling, that's kind of like the essence of all of it. And to a certain extent, when you have a business, you also need to have a lot of space that allows you to make mistakes or discover something that you never would have discovered before, maybe even by accident. So these are good things. Some of the best experiences happen because of this kind of freedom, right? So obviously without freedom, you're going to be kind of a boring and uninteresting person. You're going to be deprived of new experiences or the opportunity to make mistakes and learn from them, deprived of meaning and purpose. For me, also good memories, deprived of learning. And you're probably going to be following the herd, and you're not going to be leading or creating an impact, and unable to achieve greatness as well. So if you're too far on either end, it's going to be really hard for you to achieve much of anything. Okay, so when there's too much freedom and not enough structure, and those of you who have kids probably already know this, and this is also true in business. When I was downhill mountain bike racing, a lot of the guys that I raced with, I was 36 at the time, and I was racing with guys in their early 20s, and they could get away with things like smoking a doob and just riding their way onto the podium, right? Young males can do this in the sport of downhill racing. However, a 36-year-old female, they're going to need more of a strategy because it is the kind of sport where you go out, you push your limits, and you beat yourself up a little bit, and then you have to recover from it. And also, there's a lot of strategy involved in downhill mountain bike racing. You think that you're just throwing yourself down a hill like a nut job and going as fast as you can, but there's actually a strategy behind it. And that's why I had a coach. I needed that structure, and that allowed me to have so much more fun. And it opened up so many more possibilities to me while I was racing. Now, granted, I got away from racing and I decided I just wanted to ride, but I'm really glad I got to experience the racing circuit. Now, a little bit of a business story. This is a friend. I am speaking about an acquaintance here. This is true for a lot of entrepreneurs who tend to be kind of all over the place. They're not committed to one thing. And I get being multi-passionate. I get being open to new possibilities, but sometimes it can go, that little slider can go way off to the other extreme. And these are the people that generate ideas all the time. They got all kinds of ideas, but they like never follow through. And they skip steps because they don't know what they're doing, and they don't know that they don't know what they're doing. They don't want to listen to anyone because they just want to have fun. And they think that it's too much work or too, I don't want to do that. I don't want to make rules or boundaries or structures or do any of this technical stuff. You can do that. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to flow. I'm going to go with the flow. I'm going to be heart-centered and all that. But what ends up happening is they end up exhausting themselves, kind of like what I would have done if I was racing without figuring out a plan or a strategy, or kind of like Bill Murray in the movie Groundhog Day would still be stuck in his prison if he didn't start like thinking strategically and he didn't commit to a plan, knowing that he only had one day to work with at a time. So next, I'm going to talk about striking that balance quickly here. I already talked about athletes, experiencing the freedom and exhilaration of being able to go really fast down a hill on skis or a snowboard or flight or whatever it is that makes you feel that moment in your sport. Obviously takes structure and discipline. So balance is essential for achieving greatness. Using the example of a musician, a lot of people could just get together and jam and decide that's really all that's involved with making music. You go with the flow. But I would say no. If they want to grow, if this band actually wants to grow on their terms, not on anyone else's terms, but theirs, they're probably going to need to do things like make agreements among themselves about rehearsal time, songs that they're going to write, how they're going to be written, if they're going to do covers, some kind of creative consensus, the recording and production process, marketing, obviously, especially in today's music industry, you're going to have to market and you get yourself out there because record companies aren't going to do that for you anymore. Venues to perform in, and overall management. All these things that to a creative person can sound icky are absolutely necessary if you want to grow. So let's say that they make it big and they achieve their wildest dreams. They're playing in front of thousands of people and they made it into the top 20 on Spotify, or they have a huge fan base, whatever success looks like for them. All of that's not going to happen if they're all over the place. So growth and evolution requires a solid foundation to launch from. Two examples is, if you ever try to jump from a canoe, you're not going to get anywhere because there's no foundation to jump from. And another analogy is water. The way water flows, if there's no container to channel it, it loses momentum. It starts losing energy and then it becomes, kind of stagnant, and then it turns into a swamp. And if it has no container at all, it eventually just kind of dissipates and turns into mud. So we don't want that either. And this is what I've seen happening with some entrepreneurs. They're so all over the place. They're so everywhere and nowhere that they end up everywhere and nowhere. and there's nothing there, and there's nothing to build on. There's no foundation, there's nothing there. So I think it's really important to have freedom, but to also have containers, foundations, and systems in place. And this gives you the ability to focus on your exploration and growth instead of all the other things. Those things will already be taken care of. So this is about commitment and consistency. So I'm going to wrap that up with talking about a free training or webinar that I'm going to be hosting, and it's called Clarity 2023. And in this webinar, be looking for details. We are going to talk about how to create that structure or foundation in a way that's easy so you can plan for the next 90 days. And on that continuum, we're not planning for a whole year because I think that's too much on the structure end of things where you're not allowing room to expand into. And I think it's unrealistic to plan that far ahead. To a certain extent, you want to go with the flow. We plan for the next 90 days. So we look at structure, we look at systems, we look at workflow, and how to create those containers so that within those containers, you can focus on the shit that's really going to move you forward. That's what we're talking about here. So getting back to life examples, what are some ways that you can create that solid foundation and structure for yourself in your business, if you have a business, or in life, so that you're more free to explore? Be sure to let me know what you think about freedom and structure. Tell me some stories. That would be great. And I will see you in the next episode or the next video. Bye.